Before the beginning had a name, before light was tamed into stars, there was her, Astarte, the pulse behind creation, the shimmer before dawn, the queen whose eyes first taught the heavens how to shine. She was not born as others were, she appeared, a thought, a flame, a whisper stretching across the endless dark. And where her breath drifted, constellations awoke like embers stirred from sleep. The cosmos had no rhythm until she moved. When her body turned in the black sea of the void, time learned to dance. Her hands scattered silver dust that would become galaxies, and her voice, low, resonant, irresistible, taught silence the shape of song. The first lovers met under her gaze, and the first wars began in her name. For she was the goddess of both tenderness and fire, of wounds that heal and kisses that destroy. Astarte's realm was not a kingdom of marble and gold, but of stars that obeyed her mood. When she smiled, they flared brighter. When she wept, comets fell like tears. She ruled from a throne woven of nebulae, wrapped in veils of light that shimmered with every breath of creation. Her presence carried the scent of unknown flowers, a sweetness that belonged neither to earth nor heaven, something perilously in between. Those who beheld her swore she was both mercy and doom. They called her the morning star, yet she was also the darkness that made the star visible. The ancients would lift their faces to the sky, whispering her name in the hush before dawn, believing that in her brilliance lay the balance of the world. For Astarte was love in its purest form, not gentle, not safe, but absolute. A love that builds kingdoms only to burn them into memory. Legends say that her light once touched the earth when humankind was young. She descended as a star falling slowly, wrapped in fire, her feet kissing the ocean. The waters boiled with desire and reverence, rising to greet her, while the land trembled under the weight of her beauty. From her footsteps bloomed red lilies, glowing faintly even after she vanished. The air kept the echo of her laughter, that silvery, dangerous sound that could comfort or undo a heart. Wherever she went, worship followed. Temples of ivory and crimson stone were raised beneath the open sky so that her priests could see her throne above. They offered her honey and myrrh, gold and the beating of their own hearts. At dusk, the priestesses danced in slow circles, their movements tracing constellations only she could read. Each gesture was a prayer, a surrender, a confession. They danced not to please her, but to remind themselves what longing was made of. For Astarte was not a goddess to be owned. She was desire unbound, the truth of hunger hidden beneath the holiness of stars. Her favor could bring abundance, crops overflowing, lovers reunited, children born with laughter in their lungs. But her jealousy was as radiant as her mercy.
Entire cities could vanish under storms of sand if her name was spoken without devotion. Love and destruction were her twin gifts. The faithful could never know which one she would give. They said her eyes were galaxies, endless, unreachable, alive with distant storms. To meet her gaze was to remember everything one had ever loved and lost. Her voice carried the gravity of oceans and the sweetness of the first heartbeat. Mortals who dreamed of her often woke trembling, whispering her name as though it still burned on their lips. Many went mad searching the skies for another glimpse of her light, building towers and altars that never touched the horizon where she lingered. But Astarte herself was not cruel. She was vast. The universe spoke through her, and even she bowed to the rhythm of its tides. She longed as deeply as those who worshipped her. Within her divine heart, infinite and aching, she carried a secret sorrow, that she could never truly touch what she created. Every star that bloomed from her light drifted farther away, leaving her surrounded by brilliance, yet utterly alone. Sometimes she would descend to the edge of creation, where the stars thinned into shadow. There she would listen to the echo of her own heartbeat reverberating through the void. The sound was beautiful and unbearable. It reminded her that even eternity feels empty when no one can hold you. So she would stretch her arms toward the distant blue of mortal skies, yearning to understand what it meant to love with limits, to live within time. In those moments, the stars closest to her dimmed, as though sharing her sorrow. Her tears fell as meteors, searing through the night to remind the world that their goddess still watched, still felt. Lovers who saw a falling star would press their foreheads together and make silent vows, believing she blessed their union. But the wise whispered that Astarte's tears were not blessings at all. They were memories of love too vast to endure.
The poets of old wrote that when the sea sighs beneath the moon, it is Astarte breathing. When two strangers lock eyes and feel their souls collide, it is her touch. When war erupts and lovers are torn apart by fate, her heart splits open again. She is everywhere passion dares to exist, in the heat of devotion, the cruelty of beauty, the sweetness of surrender. She is the pulse behind all beginnings and endings. Her myth was never one of comfort. It was a mirror polished in starlight, showing humanity what it means to crave, to destroy, to love beyond reason. In her temples, her name was sung not as praise, but as confession. Astarte, Astarte, each syllable rising like smoke from trembling lips. And those who whispered it knew to love her was to be undone, yet they whispered still. There are nights even now when her light burns too brightly to be ignored. The air hums with unseen energy, and hearts beat faster for reasons they cannot name. That is when she passes overhead, not as a goddess of ancient stone, but as the endless shimmer of desire itself. The wind grows warm, the world seems to hold its breath, and for a heartbeat, the veil between heaven and flesh becomes thin. It is said that if you close your eyes and listen closely on such nights, you can hear her calling, not in words, but in feeling. A slow, magnetic pull beneath your ribs, a whisper reminding you that love and ruin were never meant to be different things, that creation itself was born from longing, and that longing will always seek its reflection. She is the rhythm that the universe cannot stop hearing, the heartbeat of stars, the promise that beauty, no matter how dangerous, is always worth the risk of burning.
And somewhere in that vast, trembling silence beyond the constellations, Astarte watches, luminous, untouchable, and still searching. Her eyes linger on the world below, on its fleeting lives, its wars of passion, its fragile tenderness. She knows that what mortals call love is only an echo of her eternal ache, yet she envies it, that brief, mortal fire that can consume everything and then fade into peace. Perhaps that is why her light keeps returning, every dusk, every dawn. Perhaps that is why she never turns away, even as the centuries fall away like dust. She cannot help but look. She cannot help but hope that somewhere in that sparks she scattered, a heart might burn bright enough to mirror her own. So when you see the evening star rising, delicate, golden, trembling against the deep blue, remember her. Remember that she is both blessing and peril, beauty and devastation, that every story of love carries her shadow, and every prayer whispered into the dark eventually finds her ear. Because Astarte is not gone. She is every pulse of desire, every flicker of awe that stirs beneath your skin. She is the secret that the universe keeps repeating, that to love is to risk burning, and to burn is to live forever in the light of the stars.
There are countless stars in the vault of night, but among them all one burns differently. Softer, warmer, as though it remembers touch. That star is the reflection of Astarte's heart, and beneath its glow lives the mortal who once dared to love her. His name has been lost to sand and time, but his soul still hums in the rhythm of her light. Some call him the King of Tyre, others the Dreamer of the Sea. Yet to her, he was simply the one who looked at the heavens not with fear, but with longing. He first saw her on a night when the world was perfectly still. The waves were silver under the moon, and the air carried a fragrance he could not name. Sweet, electric, alive. The sky trembled with unfamiliar brightness, and from that brightness descended a figure robed in the shimmer of dawn. Astarte stood upon the shore, her feet barely touching the water, and all the tides bent toward her as if drawn by secret gravity. Her hair flowed like molten gold through the starlight, and her skin seemed carved from the moon itself. When she breathed, constellations quivered. When she moved, the wind shifted to follow. Her eyes, those endless violet depths, held both promise and peril. When she spoke, her voice came not from her lips, but from the very air, each word a vibration through the bones of the earth. He fell to his knees, not in worship, but in awe. He did not see a goddess. He saw a presence that made his soul remember something older than flesh. Her beauty was unbearable. It was not made for eyes that blink or hearts that beat. Yet even as her radiance threatened to unmake him, he could not look away. Astarte watched him with the calm curiosity of eternity meeting mortality. She had seen kings, lovers, and dreamers cry her name, but none had ever looked at her as he did, not as an idol or a storm, but as something that could be understood. His silence was not submission, it was recognition.
and in that stillness between them, the universe seemed to pause. "You are not afraid?" she said. The words slipped into his mind like silk over flame. He answered, "I am, but I do not wish to be." His voice trembled, and she felt something unexpected stir within her. Warmth, not born of stars, but of something far smaller, more dangerous. He was fragile, utterly so, yet his gaze did not waver. It fascinated her, the way humans could stand before the infinite and still dare to feel. She circled him slowly, the hem of her light brushing his skin, leaving a trail of shimmering warmth. "You know who I am?" she said. "I know what you are, but not why you've come."
Astarte's smile was a slow unfolding, not joy, but recognition of shared mystery. Even I do not always know why I come. The stars move through me as I move through them. Perhaps you called, even without knowing. He bowed his head. If I did, it was because I was lonely. Lonely. The word lingered like the faint echo of her own divine ache. It was such a human word, yet it struck her with the weight of truth. Loneliness. The silence that even eternity cannot fill. Lonely, she repeated softly, tasting the word as though it were forbidden. Tell me, mortal, what does it mean to you? It means to look at something beautiful and know it cannot be yours. Her light dimmed for a moment, not in anger, but in understanding. Then you and I are not so different. She reached out, and her fingers grazed his cheek. It was like being touched by light that had learned to ache. His breath caught, and for a heartbeat, the mortal and the goddess existed in perfect stillness, suspended between creation and ruin. The sea murmured around them, restless, jealous. The waves reached toward her like worshippers, but she ignored them. All her attention was fixed on the fragile creature before her, this man of flesh and heartbeat, whose eyes held the same hunger that burned in the stars she ruled. He whispered, "If I were to touch you, would it destroy me?" "Yes," she answered. "But destruction is only another form of transformation." There was no threat in her tone, only truth. She had seen countless souls rise and fall through love, kings who burned cities for her smile, queens who drowned empires for her blessing. Yet none had ever reached her. They worshipped the fire, but feared the burn. But this man did not step back. His fear was there, trembling in his hands, yet it did not rule him. That quiet defiance drew her closer. He whispered, "I would rather be destroyed by you than live untouched by what you are." The stars leaned nearer, curious. Even the wind held its breath. Astarte, queen of the heavens, found herself gazing upon a creature who would rather perish in beauty than survive in emptiness. It was both foolish and divine, and for the first time she envied the courage of mortality. In him she saw her reflection, not the goddess adored in temples, but the woman hidden beneath the veil of starlight. She had longed to be seen, not worshipped, touched, not feared. His gaze stripped away her divinity and left only the ache beneath it.
She wondered if the other gods could feel what she felt now. This trembling intimacy that made the infinite seem small. Her voice softened. You speak as though you know the language of stars. He smiled faintly. No, only the language of longing. It sounds the same. Her laughter rippled across the waves, bright and sad. Perhaps it does. The air shimmered with a quiet hum, the vibration of unseen forces bending closer. Astarte felt the pull within her, that dangerous gravity when desire meets recognition. She had worn 1,000 forms, been adored in every tongue. Yet this moment, this fragile exchange, felt more real than all of them. She leaned closer, her light spilling over him like dawn through mist. What is it you want, mortal? He swallowed. To know you, not as a goddess, as one who feels. The honesty in his words unmade her, more than worship ever could. No offering, no empire had ever reached her the way this single sentence did, for within it was the one thing she had never been granted: understanding. The sea hissed with jealousy. The stars flickered in warning. Even the wind seemed to plead restraint. But Astarte no longer listened. She touched his chest, feeling the frantic rhythm of his heart beneath her palm. Such a fragile sound, quick, finite, full of terror and wonder. It was the music she had sought for ages without knowing. This, she whispered, is what makes you beautiful, that you live knowing it will end. He met her gaze, and you shine, knowing you cannot die. Their truths hung between them, glowing like a single star caught between two skies. In that quiet, Astarte saw the reflection of her own yearning, the hunger to feel something that time could erase, something that mattered because it could be lost. And she realized that this man, with his trembling voice and mortal heart, was not merely her creation. He was her mirror. The waves broke around them, slow and deliberate, marking the rhythm of some ancient vow. The world itself seemed to lean closer, waiting to see what the goddess would do. Astarte smiled, a small, aching curve that carried the weight of eternity. Then let us both learn what it means, you to love what cannot stay, and I to desire what must fade. The stars quivered in approval, and the sea fell silent, as if the universe itself had exhaled. Two beings, one infinite, one fleeting, stood at the edge of creation, bound not by worship, but by the echo of the same longing. And in that fragile, impossible moment, Astarte, the Star Queen, goddess of love and war, ceased to be untouchable. She became something else entirely. A woman reaching for a heartbeat.
Under the same night that had first brought them together, the heavens began to tremble. the stars that once shimmered in devotion to their queen now flickered in hesitation, as though questioning her defiance. The sea, once calm and adoring, stirred restlessly beneath her feet. Every realm that belonged to her, sky, tide, and starlight, seemed to whisper warnings. But Astarte did not listen. She lingered in the warmth of his nearness, the mortal who had dared to see her as something more than divine. Yet the cosmos has its own laws, and even gods cannot love without consequence. He reached for her again, hesitant but hungry, his hand trembling as it neared her light. When his fingers brushed her skin, the night erupted in silver fire. Astarte gasped, not from pain, but from the unbearable sweetness of the contact. She could feel his pulse racing through her touch, each beat like a spark flung into the vastness of her immortal stillness. For the first time in eternity, she felt alive. But with that awakening came fracture. Above them, constellations began to distort. The delicate harmony of the heavens faltered, stars veering from their ancient paths. From the horizon rose the sound of thunder, deep and sorrowful, as if the sky itself grieved. The other gods were stirring, and they would not forgive her trespass. "You must stop," he whispered, sensing the shift around them. "The world changes when you touch me." Astarte's voice trembled. "Then let it change." Her defiance was soft but absolute. Yet as she spoke, the sea surged violently against the shore, salt and foam crashing around them like furious applause. The moon dimmed, hiding her face behind drifting clouds. The universe recoiled from her rebellion. She turned her gaze to the heavens, and for the first time they looked unfamiliar, distant, almost hostile. She murmured, "They would have me cold and perfect, but I am tired of perfection. I crave the imperfect, the pulse, the breath, the fear." He stepped closer, though his eyes shone with both love and dread. "And if it costs you everything, then let everything burn," she said. And so it began, the collision of passion and divinity, of infinite desire against the iron laws of creation. The air thickened with power. Her light flared violently, painting the waves with molten gold. The scent of ozone filled the night, heavy and electric. Her heart, a thing that was not supposed to exist, throbbed with wild rhythm. Every glance from him was both ecstasy and torment. She longed to draw him closer, to taste the warmth of his mortal breath. Yet she feared that one more heartbeat shared between them would unravel the cosmos entirely. "You do not understand," she said through trembling lips. "If I love you fully, the stars will fall." He smiled, tragic and tender. "Then let them fall. Let the world remember that once a goddess loved." His words pierced her deeper than any blade. There was a purity in them, a mortal's defiance of fate. But in that purity lay the cruelty of truth.
He could die for love, but she could not. Immortality is not freedom. It is a cage made of eternity. She closed the distance between them, her light mingling with his shadow. The air quivered as if the night itself could not bear their closeness. You do not say that if you knew what your love demands, he whispered. I know. I can feel it every time you look at me. Astarte's breath caught. And still you stay. Because I would rather be destroyed by you than untouched by truth. Her light dimmed, sorrow spreading through her glow like dusk through dawn. You speak as though you have a choice. He touched her cheek, and for a fleeting instant the world seemed to stop. Stars froze mid-glimmer, the tide paused mid-rise, and she knew he did not belong to eternity, yet he was the only thing within it that made her existence bearable. The sky roared, breaking the stillness. From the blackness above, a comet tore across the heavens, a streak of fire against the dark. It was a warning. Astarte felt it deep within her being. She said, "They come for me."
He looked upward, fear flashing through his eyes. Who? The gods, she whispered. The order that binds all things. They will not allow me to love what dies. She could hear their voices in the wind, 1,000 ancient murmurs of judgment. They called her back to the cold perfection she had abandoned. But the thought of returning, of being endless and untouched, was unbearable. I have disobeyed the balance, she said. Love is creation and destruction in one breath, and now the two war within me. He reached for her hands, his warmth grounding her to the fragile world she had nearly undone. Then fight for it, he said. If your love is forbidden, let it become your rebellion. Her heart, vast and cosmic, pulsed with something like pride and terror. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that love could stand against the weight of eternity. But as she looked at him, she saw it too clearly. His pulse fading, his body trembling beneath the strain of standing in her presence. His mortal shell was not made to hold divine fire. She cupped his face in her hands, her light wrapping around him like a dying star's glow. You are burning, she said. I'm alive, he answered, smiling through the pain. For the first time, I am alive. Tears, something she had never known, formed in her eyes, glimmering like shards of falling stars. And when you die, she whispered. He brushed her tears away with shaking fingers. Then remember me. Let the stars carry my name. Her sorrow deepened into something fierce, primal. Love twisted into anguish, longing into fury. Above them, the constellations flared in agony, and the sea convulsed with storm. Lightning split the sky, each flash a heartbeat of divine rage. The gods' voices thundered through the wind. Astarte, return to your throne. The heavens do not bleed for mortals. But she stood firm, her light blazing against the storm. "Then let the heavens bleed," she cried.
Her power surged outward, shaking the air, cracking the waves. The world trembled under her defiance. For love, she would undo the very order she had once upheld. He tried to hold her, but she was becoming too bright, too fierce to touch. Her divinity was unraveling, spilling like molten gold across the night. The stars dimmed, retreating from her radiance. She had become both light and flame, love and destruction entwined. "Go," she pleaded, voice breaking. "If you stay, you will vanish within me." He shook his head, his body trembling, his voice barely more than a breath. "Then let me vanish." The storm reached its peak. The heavens tore open, releasing a downpour of silver rain, tears of the cosmos. Astarte screamed, not in rage, but in unbearable love. Her cry echoed through every realm, shaking the pillars of creation. Then silence. The sea calmed. The storm withdrew. The sky, though wounded, shimmered once more with fragile light. But where the mortal had stood, there was nothing, only a faint shimmer in the air, like the memory of warmth. Astarte fell to her knees, her light flickering weakly. In her arms she cradled emptiness, yet it felt heavier than the weight of all her stars. Around her, the universe began to repair itself, but something sacred had been broken. She whispered his name, a sound too soft for time to remember, and with it a single tear slipped into the sea. Where it fell, the waters turned luminous, birthing a new constellation reflected in the tide. Astarte looked upward. The stars no longer sang to her as they once did. Some turned away in judgment, others in sorrow. But one faint, steadfast light shone directly above her, trembling, alive. Her voice broke the silence. "So even the gods cannot kill what love has made." The wind stilled, as though the universe itself bowed to her truth. But within her heart there was only ache, a radiant, endless ache that would outlast the stars. And thus began her punishment, to shine forever, surrounded by eternity, but never again to feel its warmth. The Star Queen, radiant and untouchable, condemned by her own heart to remember what she was never meant to hold.
The night stretched wide and trembling, its silence alive with memory. Astarte stood upon the edge of the sea, where light met shadow, where the heavens bent low to listen. The world had not yet healed from her defiance. The stars still flickered like wounded hearts, and the waves rolled heavy with her sorrow. Yet within her something vast stirred, a rhythm that no punishment could silence. The mortal was gone, dissolved into air, into starlight, into the pulse that now echoed through her being. But she could still feel him, the ghost of his warmth,
the echo of his heartbeat woven into her own endless light. Every breath of wind seemed to whisper his name. Every shimmer on the tide was his memory, clinging to her like a song too sacred to forget. Her divinity quivered beneath the weight of feeling. What was she now, a goddess or a wound made of stars? Love had undone her perfection, and yet in the ruin she felt closer to creation than ever before. The sky began to glow faintly, as though responding to her grief. The constellations that had once shunned her now leaned nearer, trembling, drawn to the gravity of her sorrow. Light rippled across the heavens like slow, deliberate breathing. And in that celestial rhythm, Astarte felt something awaken, an ache vast enough to swallow eternity. Her voice rose, soft at first, then vast as the ocean's heart. She whispered, "Come back to me," not to command, but to plead. The words trembled through the air, scattering across the stars. "You who were mortal, you who dared to love me. If I am made of light, then let my light find you." The sea responded. Waves rose high, luminous and slow, glowing from within as though stirred by a memory of her touch. Her tears, liquid fire, fell into the water, and from each drop bloomed a shimmer of gold. The tide surged upward, wrapping around her ankles, her knees, her waist, pulling her closer to the element that had always loved her best. Astarte closed her eyes. In the dark behind her lids, she saw him, smiling, fragile, burning with life. The memory of his gaze, the warmth of his trembling hand, each sensation pulsed through her like the beat of a second heart. The sky above shivered. The stars began to hum, faintly at first, then louder, vibrating in harmony with her longing. 1,000 tones merged into one, a sound between music and heartbeat, vast enough to bridge the worlds. She spread her arms, surrendering to the rhythm. Her light spilled outward, spiraling into the sky in ribbons of molten gold. It flowed across the heavens like breath, binding her to every corner of the cosmos. The constellations brightened, trembling with recognition. The universe itself seemed to inhale, waiting.
Her voice broke into a melody, a low, resonant chant that no mortal tongue could hold. It was not language, but essence, love, grief, and surrender woven into vibration. Each note rippled outward, bending stars, stilling wind. The sea mirrored the sound, its waves rising and falling in perfect rhythm. The mortal's presence began to take shape within that sound, a shimmer, a pulse, a warmth returning from the edges of nothingness. She felt him before she saw him, the way flame feels the air that feeds it. His form appeared like a mirage in the golden mist, translucent, luminous, more spirit than flesh. Yet his eyes were the same, alive with awe, with tenderness. Astarte reached toward him, her light trembling. "You've crossed the veil. You shouldn't be here." His voice, faint but steady, reached her. "I was never gone. I called you, and I remembered how to exist." She touched his face softly, as though he would dissolve. Her fingers met light and warmth, not skin, yet it was enough. The air between them pulsed with rhythm, their breaths sinking to the same invisible beat. I am not whole, but in your light I feel myself again. Tears welled in her eyes, each one shining like a newborn star. And I am nothing without the touch of what I lost. Their foreheads met, and the universe shuddered. Stars flared, seas rose, winds spun into whirls of gold. The line between divine and mortal, between spirit and flesh, began to blur. Their light mingled, swirling into a vast current that rippled through creation. In that moment there was no God and no man, only two beings suspended in the rhythm of eternity, their love a vibration that the cosmos itself began to echo. Astarte felt herself dissolving, not into death, but into union. Her form grew translucent, her voice blending with his, her light folding into his warmth. The stars responded, their brightness pulsing in unison, as if the heavens themselves shared their breath. The sensation was unbearable, too vast for language, too intimate for thought. It was the agony of ecstasy, the sweetness of loss turned eternal. The boundaries of her being stretched until she could feel everything, the pull of every tide, the spark of every star born from her name. For one instant, she was everything, the goddess and the woman, the light and the wound, the lover and the universe that held them both. Then the vision began to fade. His light, fragile and mortal still, could not sustain the immensity of her embrace. He looked at her one last time, his gaze steady and full of peace.
"You've made me part of the stars," he said, "and you've made me remember what they mean," she whispered. He smiled, and with that smile he unraveled, his form scattering into 1,000 points of golden dust that rose into the night sky. The stars brightened one by one until they burned with the same hue as his vanished light. Astarte fell to her knees, the sea lapping around her like an embrace. Her light dimmed to a soft glow, her voice trembling into silence. But the pulse, the rhythm they had created together, continued to echo in her, steady as a heartbeat. She could still feel him in every glimmer of the sky, every whisper of wind. He was gone, and yet he was everywhere. The cosmos itself had become his body, the night his breath. The storm that had once punished her now bowed in reverence. The waves moved with gentleness as though soothing their queen. The stars, newly born from her loss, sang softly, each one a note in the eternal hymn of her love. Astarte lifted her gaze. "So this is eternity," she murmured. "To feel forever what should have lasted a single heartbeat." Her tears fell freely now, each one joining the sea, turning the waters to liquid starlight. The horizon shimmered gold, the dawn struggling to break through the veil of night. The heavens, moved by her surrender, granted her one mercy, the constellation that bore his name. It appeared faintly at first, then clear, a cluster of gold above the sea, pulsing in rhythm with her heart.
She smiled through her tears. "You are the star that will not fade." The words were a vow, soft and eternal. And so, under a sky woven with her sorrow and her love, Astarte rose once more, not as a goddess untouched by feeling, but as a being reborn through it. Her divinity no longer cold, her light no longer distant. She had become something greater than perfection. She had become human in the one way the gods feared most, through love that hurt, through beauty that burned, through longing that refused to die. The sea sighed, the stars hummed, and in that sacred silence, the universe seemed to exhale with her. The rhythm of creation pulsed anew, not in balance, but in devotion. Astarte spread her hands toward the heavens, and the light of 1,000 worlds bowed before her. Her voice, now tender and infinite, whispered into the wind, "Let the stars remember us." And they did.
The dawn came softly, as though afraid to disturb her. Its first light crept across the horizon, golden and cautious, touching the tips of the waves that glowed faintly from the night before. The sea lay calm at last, no longer roaring with defiance or grief, but breathing slow and deep like a creature at peace. And there, at the edge of the quiet world, stood Astarte. Her light had changed. It no longer burned with the furious brilliance of a goddess untouchable. It glowed instead with a tender, steady warmth, like the last ember of a great fire, or the memory of a heartbeat fading into silence. She was not diminished, but transformed. The universe around her had shifted, and so had she. The sky, still trembling from the night's unraveling, bore new constellations that no priest had ever seen. Among them shimmered a faint golden pattern, a cluster of stars, shaped like a man reaching toward a light that forever retreats. The mortals below would one day name it for him, the lost lover of the Star Queen. To them, it would be a tale of beauty and warning. To her, it was everything she could not forget. Astarte turned her gaze upon that constellation. Its faint gleam pulsed in rhythm with her own heart, each flicker a whisper of his presence. For a long moment she did nothing, only watched, letting the silence settle over her like silk. Then she spoke, her voice low and resonant, the sound carrying far beyond the sea. She said, "Once I ruled the heavens, now I rule only memory." Her words did not tremble, they drifted, calm and sure, through the still air. She was no longer a goddess of endless light, nor the queen who demanded worship. She had become something rarer, softer, a story that lived within every sigh of the ocean, every shimmer of dawn, every heart that had ever dared to love what it could not keep. The gods had not punished her, not in the way she had feared. Instead, they had left her to her solitude, bound to the very stars she had defied. Her throne remained in the heavens, but her heart was forever anchored to the sea. When mortals looked upward, they saw her brilliance. When they looked across the waves, they felt her sorrow. and perhaps that was punishment enough.
She stepped into the shallows, the water curling around her ankles with reverence. Beneath the surface, her reflection wavered, a vision of light made human. She remembered the touch of his hand, the sound of his breath, the warmth that had once filled the space between them. Every detail returned like a dream revisited too often, too sweet to bear, too sacred to forget. Astarte lifted her hands, and light rippled from her palms, tracing gentle arcs across the sea. Where it touched, flowers of foam bloomed, shining like stars fallen into the water. The waves whispered back to her in a language older than words. They told her she had changed the world, that her love had birthed new tides, new constellations, new myths, that the balance she had broken had simply become a different kind of harmony. And she knew it was true. Love had not destroyed her, it had remade her. The perfection she once wore like armor was gone, replaced by something far more luminous: vulnerability. She could feel the sorrow of mortals now, the ache of longing, the beauty of impermanence. Every prayer that rose to the night carried a fragment of her own pain, and every answered wish bore the warmth of her compassion. She closed her eyes and breathed. The air tasted of salt and dawn. The horizon shimmered faintly, blurring the line between sea and sky. She could feel the mortal world below stirring to life, the cries of gulls, the distant hum of cities that would one day worship her name. But now they would not pray for victory or desire alone. They would pray to understand. For the first time, she smiled. It was not the radiant smile of a goddess who commands. It was the small, quiet smile of one who has finally learned the cost of her own divinity. "Let them tell it," she murmured to the wind. "Let them say that the stars themselves once loved." And the wind, faithful as always, carried her words far and wide. It swept over temples and mountains, through the hearts of sailors and dreamers, whispering her name like a secret, Astarte, the Star Queen, who fell in love with a mortal and turned her sorrow into light. As the day grew brighter, her form began to dissolve. The golden edges of her figure blurred, scattering into the morning air like dust from a sunbeam. The sea rose in farewell, its surface shimmering with liquid fire. Each droplet that fell from her hands became a spark of light, rising upward, climbing back into the sky.
Soon she was everywhere. The dawn clouds glowed faintly with her hue. The horizon shimmered in the pattern of her breath. She had not died, for gods do not die. She had become what she was always meant to be: the pulse between light and darkness, the bridge between what endures and what fades. Above, the stars that had condemned her now watched in silence. The old order had been shaken, yet even they could not deny the beauty of what she had made. Her love had scarred the cosmos, yes, but it had also given it new rhythm. Even eternity must bow before what burns so purely. And from the edge of that eternal sky, her voice lingered one last time. "I am the silence after passion, the glow after flame.
I am love that endures because it cannot remain. The words spread through every realm, a soft hum within the fabric of existence. Where they touched, hearts stirred, tears were shed without knowing why. The mortals who felt it called it wonder. The gods who felt it called it fear. The world moved on, but her echo did not fade. Every dusk carried her longing, every dawn her forgiveness. When lovers met beneath the stars, they felt her watching, gentle, patient, infinite. When the lonely whispered to the sea, it was her voice that answered in the tide. And so Astarte lived, not in temples of stone or prayers of flame, but in the fragile places where divinity and desire meet. She lived in the trembling hands of those who dared to reach for what they should not, in the sigh before a kiss, in the ache that follows. The heavens still call her the Star Queen. The mortals know her as the goddess of love and war. But beneath those names lies the truth only the sea remembers, that she was once a woman who loved too deeply and made the universe remember what that meant. The light of dawn finally claimed the sky, and the stars withdrew, their song fading into stillness. Yet one star remained, shining faintly even under the sun's brilliance. It was small, almost hidden, but alive, beating like a distant heart. Astarte watched it from everywhere and nowhere. She no longer need form to feel. The mortal's light was with her, his presence woven into the endless tapestry she had become. The sea breathed, the wind sighed, the universe settled into its quiet rhythm again. And for the first time in all creation, the goddess of love wept not from loss, but from gratitude.
There are stories the world does not speak aloud. Stories that live in the tremor of a sigh, the hush between waves, the pulse of a heartbeat. Astarte's story is one such tale, whispered across the sky in a language older than wind or tide, carried in starlight and the silver of the restless sea. To hear it is to feel the fragile ache of existence, the longing behind every glance, every touch, the impossible desire to hold what cannot remain. She was a queen of stars, a goddess of love and war, yet her divinity was not measured in conquest or command. It was in feeling, in the fire that surged when her heart touched a mortal's, in the ache that followed, in the pulse that lingered long after the body faded. Even eternity could not prepare her for the vulnerability of desire, nor the weight of passion that burns both heavens and hearts alike. Love in Astarte's story is neither gentle nor quiet. It is the pulse of creation, violent and exquisite, burning worlds even as it births them. Her passion carved paths through heaven and sea alike, leaving trails of brilliance that would never fade entirely. To love as she loved is to risk everything, to stand on the edge of light and shadow, to surrender to the force that both elevates and destroys. Even in loss, there is triumph. The mortal she cherished vanished, yet his presence lingered, not as form, not as flesh, but as echo, as pulse, as light woven into the fabric of the universe. In that absence, she discovered the enduring nature of connection, the way one heartbeat can ripple outward to shape eternity, the way a single soul can leave traces across infinite realms. His memory became a constellation, a cluster of stars shaped like a man reaching toward a light that forever retreats. Her divinity, too, changed. No longer was she the cold perfection the heavens demanded. She became something richer, luminous with sorrow, tender with loss, infinite with understanding. To be a goddess is not to exist untouched, but to carry the weight of feeling across time and space, to endure what mortals cannot, and to shine with the knowledge of both joy and pain. Astarte's story reminds us that passion is never neat. Desire does not follow rules. Love does not honor permanence. To open one's heart is to invite chaos, to risk being consumed, to risk illumination and devastation in equal measure. Yet in that risk lies the beauty that makes the soul remember it is alive. It is in the burn, not the safety, that we learn our depth, our vulnerability, our capacity to transcend the ordinary. The stars themselves seem to sigh with her story. Some flicker faintly as though breathing, remembering the figure who bent eternity to her longing. Others blaze boldly, reminding us of the fire she carried and the courage it took to feel beyond fear. Even the sea whispers her name in rhythm with tides that stretch across millennia, echoing the pulse of her heart in every wave.
We too live in her shadow, whether we see it or not. Every fleeting moment of passion, every risk we take for love, every ache of longing carries her essence. We learn from her the paradox of existence. To feel is to be fragile, yet to feel deeply is to become eternal. Her light is in us, in the way our hearts quicken at beauty, in the tremble of our hands when longing reaches its peak, in the quiet after the storm of emotion passes. Consider the mortal who once dared to touch her. He vanished, yet his story lingers in every heartbeat she left behind. In this intertwining of loss and remembrance, Astarte's true gift is revealed. Love, though fleeting, is never wasted. It becomes a force, shaping worlds, echoing in eternity, teaching even gods the weight and value of feeling. In the aftermath, there is a silence that is not empty, but filled with resonance. One can hear it in the sway of the tides, in the flicker of stars that have known her grief, in the soft brushing of wind across a sleeping city. That is where Astarte lives now, not in temples or statues, not in rigid rules of worship, but in the places where passion and beauty converge, and where hearts remember to dare what they cannot hold. Her story is both caution and invitation. It warns of the fire that burns in love unbound, yet it beckons with the promise of illumination. To follow her tale is to accept the ache and the ecstasy, the destruction and the creation, the solitude that comes with standing radiant and vulnerable. It is to feel in ways that transcend the ordinary, to understand that every heart carries the possibility of both divinity and devastation. The night sky will always remember her. The constellation of her lost love pulses quietly, steady and patient, a beacon for all who seek the courage to desire beyond fear. Beneath that sky, the sea whispers still, soft and eternal, carrying her name in every ebb and flow, in every shimmer of moonlight upon the waves. Astarte teaches that love does not obey rules, that desire is neither neat nor kind, and that to give oneself fully is both gift and torment. Yet it is in this giving that immortality is found, not in preservation of form, but in the echo left behind, in the pulse that continues long after the moment passes. Her story is proof that beauty is inseparable from pain, that light cannot exist without shadow, and that the act of loving, even for an instant, leaves a mark on the cosmos. She is everywhere, yet untouchable. She is within the tremor of every heart daring to love, in the hush of the ocean, in the flicker of a star that refuses to fade. The myth of Astarte is a reminder that the divine and the mortal meet in the most fragile of places, where longing, risk, and courage converge. That meeting is not perfect. It is often cruel, yet it is the only path to transcendence.
Listen closely, and you may hear her in the spaces between things. The pause before a kiss, the hush of dawn, the quiet ripple across a silver tide. She is the whisper that turns grief into wonder, that makes loss luminous, that teaches the heart the weight and beauty of its own desire. Her story lingers after the song of the world fades. It is in small, delicate moments, the reflection of moonlight on a calm sea, the flicker of a single star in twilight, the tremor of a hand reaching for what cannot remain. That is where she is found. Never far, never gone, eternally present in the places where love touches the infinite. And when the listener looks up at the night sky, or feels the tide curl around their feet, or remembers the pulse of a fleeting embrace, they are not alone. Astarte is there, luminous and aching, reminding all who listen to live fully, to desire without fear, and to know that even the briefest connection can leave the world forever changed. Her myth is a mirror of the soul. It shows the beauty in longing, the courage in vulnerability, the permanence in impermanence. She teaches that even gods can ache, and that even mortals can leave their mark upon eternity. And so, in every flickering star, in every whispered wave, in every heartbeat that dares to feel beyond reason, Astarte lives.
not as a ruler untouched by emotion, but as a reminder that love is creation, that passion is power, that desire can both destroy and illuminate, and that the spaces between loss and memory are where the soul discovers its own endless horizon. The night leans closer. The stars pulse gently, a rhythm of remembrance and longing. The sea murmurs her name in quiet devotion, and in that soft, eternal cadence, the listener feels it, the ache, the beauty, the immortality of having loved, of having felt, of having lived in the wake of a goddess who dared to feel everything. Astarte, the Star Queen, eternal and human, luminous and broken, remains, not in form, but in resonance, not in rule, but in pulse, not in permanence, but in memory. And somewhere in the flicker of a solitary star and the whisper of the restless tide, she waits, reminding all who listen that beauty lingers after pain, that longing endures, and that the universe itself remembers what it means to love.